Hello and welcome to the Crafting Shares. I'm Ruth from Beltane Gifts, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make one of these, which is a needle felted mermaid. Now this is a very simple mermaid, it's quite cartoony. If you wanted to make it more detailed you could do a proper face, do proper shaping to the arms, but this is just designed to be quite a simple one to make. Okay, so what we're going to need today are some finger protectors, a felting pad, this is a cloth bag filled with rice, some felting needles. I've got my small, medium and large generic felting needles. I've got a needle and thread. Now the thread doesn't need to be this colour, this is just all I had handy, so this is just kind of like a beigey coloured thread. A couple of beads, these are plastic round 3mm diameter beads. Some dyed wool locks. These are lovely, I do like wool locks. And some felting fibre, this is corriedale, and I've got eggshell and it's kind of like a teal colour. So what we're going to use first is our eggshell corriedale coloured fibre. You don't need to use this colour, you can use whatever colour you want. This I just have lots of. And what we're going to do is very similar to my previous video on how to make the basic body. We're going to start off by just creating the torso. So because this is roving, what I'm doing is just pulling it apart, starting that felting process, just making it a little bit messy, getting the fibre going in different directions. I'm then going to pop it down on the pad, and with my big needle I'm just going to start by outlining the shape of a head, so just stabbing round in a circle there. And once you've got the circle in place, what you can do is just gently pull in the fibre that's outside of that circle and just stab it into the centre. And what this does is it just creates that nice rounded shape, and we can move down. So we want to create a little bit of a neck, so we're just going to do just a couple of lines at the side there, and then we're going to want to do some arms. So I'm just pulling the fibre out a bit. You don't need to do it all in one piece of fibre, you can just add little pieces, just get a better control if you want to, but I'm doing this quite quickly. So we're just going to stab across just to get those arms. And we want them to be kind of even, and then just a bit more fibre just for the start of the torso. Okay, and we're just going to pop that down. Now I want to do the torso just a little bit longer than I need it, just because that's going to give us something that we can add on to later. Okay, now I'm having trouble getting that needle through, so I'm just swapping over to my medium, and I'm just going to go over the whole thing. I'm not stabbing too closely together at the moment, I just want to bring all that fibre in and just get rid of some of that fluffiness. Okay, once it's starting to come together, what we're going to do is peel it off. Now to do this you want to pinch as close as you can to the felting pad, and just keep letting go and then grabbing as close as you can to the body where it meets the pad. And the reason we're doing this is because we don't want to pull everything out of shape, and it will be stuck quite strongly in places to the cloth. So just keep pinching, letting go and grabbing closer and pulling. Go until you can bring the whole thing off. So I can see here that this arm definitely needs some more fibre, so I'm going to pull off more fibre and just lay it over the top of what we've already done, just to fill in any gaps. Now we're going to keep doing this, pulling off sections of fibre and adding them until it's kind of an even thickness all over, and we've got enough fibre to kind of work with. Go, so I'm going to just keep pulling it off now, turning it over and just stabbing over. What we want to do is just bulk this fibre up a little bit, just make it a bit denser before we start shaping. Now you should find that there should be less loose fibres coming through and sticking it to the cushion, and you'll know that you're kind of ready to start shaping once it's not getting stuck at all. And this just means that all the fibres are interconnecting and starting to felt. So I think I'm getting about there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by imagining that there's a stick figure through the centre of this. So we've got the head section up here, we've got the torso, and we've got the arms. Where the line ends, you have to imagine that there's a point there, and that's where we're going to start aiming for. So it's the same as making a ball, you just have to imagine there's a point in the centre and your needle will always be aiming towards that point. Same on the other side, and we're just going to work over the whole thing, just stabbing like that, and what will happen is the fibre will start to form into a ball. Now I'm doing little stabs, not going all the way through, just aiming for that central point, And at the moment I'm not stabbing too close together either. What I want to do is start getting the fibre where I want it, and we don't want to firm things up until it's starting to create that shape. Now as it's starting to form, we need to pay attention to the neck area. So what I'm going to do is just work my way round just where the arms and the head meet, just in a circle, little jabs close together in this case, because we really want to bring it in. And we're going to work our way around in kind of a line, and what this should do is just define that neck area. And to really make sure it shows up, I'm going to stab from underneath, so the back of the skull really, and just under the chin, and I'm stabbing upwards. And what this should do is just help define that ball, and that also helps define the neck. So you should be able to see that this is really shrinking and becoming a lot smaller. If you wanted it to be bigger, just add more fibre. So once it's starting to take shape and you're kind of happy with where everything is, you can start going over and stabbing a little bit closer together, not quite as deeply, and this will help with the surface and just bringing everything in rather than changing the shape completely. Okay, that's kind of getting there. It's still squishy, there's room for going over it again, but I'm going to move on to the arms and the torso first. Now, it makes the arms look really wide, so I'm going to work downwards first in the armpit area, just stabbing in, just to bring in this section, and this should help reduce everything. Now I'm imagining that there's a line all the way through the arm, so the needle is always going to be stabbing towards that line, so I'll be working round and round, just bringing everything in. And I'm always working from the armpit towards the hand, in lines that way. And what this does is it takes the fibre from where there's lots of it in the armpit area and bringing it out towards the hand, which kind of lengthens that area. You'll find that if you stab the other way and you work from the hand towards the body, that it will make the arm a little bit stumpier. So you can save that in cases where one arm's longer than the other and you want to shorten one. In this case, to start off with, I'm just going to sort of try and lengthen those arms. Okay, now the end of the arm is very fluffy, so I'm just going to work down just kind of where the wrist is. I'm going to be aiming towards that end point as though it were the centre of a ball. There we go, so you can see that's really rounded it off quite a lot. It's not perfect yet, but I want to bring everything else in before I start doing my final shape. So I'm just going to do exactly the same with the other arm. Okay, so I've done both the arms now. I'm going to go over the shoulders and just bring the whole neck area down and in, just by stabbing at a diagonal angle there, just to really define that neck and just densen up this area here. And remember to do it from the front and the back. Now the torso is really loose, so I'm just going to go over the whole thing, stabbing inwards, just to bring everything in. And again, you can always add more fibre to this if you want to, but we have got quite a long torso now compared to the length of the arms and the body. So what I'm going to do is just turn it upwards and stab just straight down. And what I'm trying to do is just to push the fibre down through the centre of the body and just to bulk up this section down here. So just lightly pinching it between finger and thumb and just stabbing straight down there. Now I'm doing the same from the sides, just bringing it down across here, and I'm working quite close to the surface at this point, just catching those loose fibres and just trying to tuck them into the sections we've already felted. And again, I'm just pinching between finger and thumb, just quite a loose pressure. This just helps to channel all the fibre down rather than it wanting to go out. And at this point, we're basically just getting the fibre where we want it. We're not shaping it or creating a nice surface. We're just fusing that fibre together just to bulk things up. Okay, so we've got a bit of a gap here. What I'm going to do is just lay it down and just catch that surface fibre and just felt that down. And what that's doing is just taking the fibre from the top here, bring it over that gap and just felting it to the fibre beyond. And as you can see, that's just closing up that gap we had. Okay, so we've got quite a lot of fibre here now. This is getting quite dense. It's still quite loose here, so we're going to start working from the sides again. Again, just imagining that stick figure line going through the centre. We're going to be stabbing round the torso, always aiming towards that line. Now as the torso comes in, you might find that the curve under the arms is just too big, in which case just go over it again, stabbing upwards at a diagonal between the torso and the arm, and that just brings everything up and in and gives us that nice shape again. Now you'll find as things come in, other things become a little bit looser, so what I'm going to do is just spend a few minutes going over the whole thing again, bringing in the arms, the head, the neck and the torso. Exactly the same technique as we've been doing. Just keep going over it until everything starts to firm up. If you do find there's any areas that are a bit wobblier than others, you can always lay more fibre over the top and felt it into place. Just see how you go. There we go. So I've spent a while just felting over the whole surface, brought everything in. As you can see, it's much smaller now, and if you can see me squishing from the side, it's a lot denser as well. I've left quite a bit of length in the torso, don't need to worry about that because we're going to be felting over the top of that. So for the next stage, what we're going to do is just pop the torso to the top, grab our other piece of coloured wool, and I'm just going to take a section off and just put that to the side because we're going to use that just to make the tail. And with the rest I'm just going to mess it up a bit, and then I'm just going to pop it in half, and one of the halves we're just going to lay over the top of the torso there, and with our needle, I'm going to use the medium needle to start off with. I'm just going to stab just around the torso. So if you see from the side there, I've got the body down here, I'm stabbing just across, probably 1.5 centimetres up, just attaching that blue fibre. And I want to go right round to the sides. Then I'm going to turn it over, take my piece that I just tore off, lay that over the top, and I'm going to continue along the same sort of line because I want it to all join up around the body, so we've got coverage from both sides. So what we should have is the torso here with a big bulk of fibre just coming off it. What we're going to do is just going to stab the outline for the tail down from the body. So I'm just doing 2 curved lines that come together into a point, and then we can fold the rest of the fibre up, just holding that same line. I've got some of the bottoms, so I'm going to fold that up too, and in from the other side. And the idea is just to bring all the fibre together just into the shape we want to create, and then we can go over the whole thing like we did the body and just start defining it. So like before, I'm just going to carefully peel it off the cushion, turn it over, and then do the same on the other side. I'm just going to start bringing everything in and just flattening it. If you can see from the side there, we've got quite a bulk of fibre towards the end. As we want the tail to taper, this is one of the points we're going to really focus on stabbing. And I'm using my medium needle at the moment because what I want to do is make this really gradual. You don't want to overstab too soon because it makes it very hard to get a nice smooth finish. Okay, so once it's all starting to come together a bit more, I'm going to pay particular attention to where the 2 coloured fibres join. If you just do lots of little jabs close together, keep rotating because we want to maintain that nice rounded shape. And once we've got that nicely attached, we can just get rid of some of this fluffiness just by working along in a line. And I've got my needle pointing slightly downwards because what I want to do is just catch those loose fibres and tuck them in. Now this is going to cause a roll of extra fibre, but once we've got everything where we want it, we can just stab straight down on that and just flatten it a little bit. So just go over it with very small, we don't want to go too deep, little jabs close together at a 90-degree angle. And what this will do is this will just flatten where the 2 fibres meet and give you a nice join. Okay, so my line's just a little bit wonky around here, so I can just, by just catching the blue, just tuck it under. I'm using quite a sharp angle, if you can see that, and it just catches that fibre and tucks it in again. Now for the rest of the fibre that we've got here, it's all very squishy, there's plenty of give in it. What we're going to do is we're going to work down from the line here where we've joined the 2 colours together, and we're going to work our way down towards the end of the tail. Okay, so what this is going to do is we're pushing all that extra fibre that way as well, so we're not going to end up bulking up too much near the top, and this extends the length of the tail as well. Now you might notice that I'm actually rotating the mermaid as I'm working. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to keep that nice rounded shape, but I don't want to have to keep moving my arm and the angle of the needle, so I'm maintaining the same angle with the needle and just changing the mermaid's direction instead. And you might find if you're working on one of these that it's just a little bit more easy going on your arm than having to change all the time. Now this is taking quite a while to do because I'm using quite a fine needle. What you could do is use a slightly thicker needle, but I'm finding for me this is working okay because it just gives me that little bit more control over the finished shape. Again, completely up to you how you do it though. Okay, so it's starting to firm up quite a lot. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and work in just small sections. I like to work in circles and just do little jabs close together just to really start to densen up this felt. And you should see as well that as you do this, you get a much smoother finish. There we go. So there's a section there that I've just gone over, and it's just looking a little bit smoother than the surrounding areas. So I'm just going to go over the whole thing doing this. There we go. So I've now gone over the whole of the tail and just brought everything in, firmed it up. So it's time to do the end of the tail. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the fibre aside and just put that away. We're going to use that later. The rest of the fibre I'm just going to pull apart and mix up again. Okay, so once we've got our ball of messy fibre, what we're going to do is we're just going to lay it over the top of the end of the tail, fold it in half so that we've got fibre on both sides. So just pop it there, oops, and there. And then we're just going to use our fine needle again and just start to attach just to the end of the tail there. Then turn it over, same on the other side. Just so that it's attached, it's not going anywhere. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to have a little stab in the shape of a little curve there. So it just gives us that nice curve. Same on the other side. Now all the extra fibre here that's just outside of the curve we've done, we're just going to roll it in slightly and stab down on it. Same on the other side. And then just underneath we're going to do another curve just from end to end. And same, just roll this extra fibre up and stab it into place. You can see that's giving us more of a tail shape. So now we've got that, all we need to do is just stab straight down. Just little jabs all over just to flatten it a bit. Then we can just peel it off. Again, do this carefully bit by bit. Turn over and stab again. And we're going to keep stabbing and flipping over just until it stops attaching itself to the cushion. Okay, so now we're going to just finish shaping the tail. So I'm going to pinch it between finger and thumb and just stab down. So if you notice, my needle is just going just against this index finger and the tail itself. And what this does, it just holds everything in place whilst we catch that fibre. Okay, now we want to even these up, so what I'm going to do is just change the curve here and just define it a little bit more. So as before, pinch between finger and thumb. So you might need to stop every now and then just to get a better idea of what else you need to stab. So we're getting quite a nice point here. I'm just going to have a little go further down from it. And same on the other side. Okay, so once we've done that, just going to lay it on the cushion again and just do a lot of little stabs just around the edges. And what this does is it just makes sure that everything stays put. Now if there's any other bits that just need going over again, exactly the same, just pinch and stab. Okay, so we've attached the tail. What we need to do now is decide which way is going to be the front. So I think for me this is going to be it. And if it's going to be a merman, you can leave it be. If it's going to be a mermaid, then what we can do is just add a little bit of fibre and create a couple of clamshells as a bra. So just take a little bit of a fibre, mess it up, and then what I'm going to do is split it into two. So we've got kind of even amounts of fibre. It's easier to measure out your fibre now than it is to do one and then have to try and work out how much you use to make the other. Probably about there. So what I'm going to do now is just roll each of these into a ball, and this just starts that felting process and make sure there aren't any loose fibres just to mess things up. There we go. So taking one of the balls, we're going to place it just to the left hand side of the chest. And just a couple of stabs straight down in the centre just to hold it in place. And then with our needle pointing towards where we've just stabbed, we're just going to work our way around the outside, just slowly catching those fibres and stabbing them into a little circle. Now because it's a clam type shape, what we want to do is make the bottom part slightly narrower. So I'm just going to stab a little bit more just around that bottom edge, just tucking everything in just to create a bit of a dull point. Go, and then just going to flatten out the top just a touch, And then it's just a case of just felting lightly over the surface, little jabs close together, just to bring everything down a bit. Now we're going to want to do a couple of lines on this, so we're going to do one here and here, and we do those just by doing little jabs close together in a straight line. And then working from the top of that shape, we're just going to stab right down just where this line ends against the body. We're just going to do a couple of little jabs, and what this does, just catch that blue and pushes it down, and it just really defines the bumps at the top there. Go. We're going to repeat that for the other one as well. There we go. Now it's time to move on to adding the eyes. Now I'm doing this first because I can use the hair then to hide where I've done my sewing. So I'm turning it over, going from the back. I've got my needle and thread. I'm just going to come in from the side of the head and come out in the middle at the back. I don't put a knot in my cotton, so I'm just going to pull it just so that it lands right in the centre there, and the tail is just hidden inside, so just keep pulling till it disappears. Then going to do a couple of little stitches. Try and gather as much of the wool fibre as you can, but make the stitch as small as you can as well. And then what we're going to do is sew through to the front, and we're just going to add a couple of eyes. Choose where you want them. I'm going to pop the bead onto the needle, and then we're going to sew back into the back of the head. Try and come out where you did your original stitches, and we're going to want to pull quite tight because we want the eye to embed a little bit. And then going to come back, do a little stitch at the back again, and then go through to where we want the other eye. Again, add your bead on and then sew through to the back. And again, we want to embed it quite well, so just give a nice pull on the back, couple of stitches, and then we're just going to sew through and just snip that off with some scissors. So that gives us our little eyes. Now, because my head wasn't that well felted, it has gone quite flat, but don't worry about that because we're adding the hair, we can bulk everything out. So if you don't have any wool locks like I've got, you can use normal wool fibre. What I would recommend is just pulling on it if you're using roving just until you get the natural length of the wool, and then you would just felt in one end, and that would give you plenty of wool just to work with and style. In the case of the locks, now if you're using locks tend to come like this, and you'll have a pointy end and a fluffy end. Now the pointy end, they tend to be loose. Those are the bits I like to have sort of hanging down and showing. You'll need to split them apart though before you attach them, and what I'd recommend is working from the pointy end and just pinching as close to where they're joined as possible, and work your way up the lock, again pinching as close as you can. And the reason we do this is just because this end at the top, the fluffy end, that's where it would be attached to the sheep. If you take from the pointy end and just pull towards the fluffy end, you'll find that the whole lock will split apart and it will just all go fluffy, and you'll lose that definition that we've got. So just always pinch as close as you can to where they're joined and then pull to separate. And I've also got a fluffier section that's been cut off a previous lock that I've used. Now I tend to keep these fluffy bits, I wouldn't have them dangling down so much just because they are a little bit messy, but they are great for building up the back of a head there. With my fine needle, I'm just going to do a few stabs. I'm using a bit of an angle with my needle because I want to use the side of the needle just to catch those locks and just lock them into place. Locks are quite tricky to felt just because a lot of it is very smooth. It just means you've got less fluffiness to work with. These bits here aren't too bad though, so I'm just going to do a couple of stabs. I'm leaving the lock loose and just stabbing into it, and what will happen is the needle will just catch what it can and tuck those in. Now with the locks, you don't want to over stab, you don't want to overwork them just because you'll lose all that texture, which is what we're really using them for. So just do a couple of stabs here and there, just enough to make sure that they're kind of attached but not enough to flatten them. Go. So I've just added some of that fluffiness just to the back of the head, and what we're going to do is use these nicer locks and fill them out. So I want to have some of the longer bits just dangling down, so get them where you want them, and then we'll just felt in the rest of the lock. So I'm just doing a couple of little jabs, kind of positioning it as I go, and then tucking the rest just towards the back, and then I think just a couple at the back as well. There we go. Then just go over the whole thing, just make sure everything's where you want it. There we go. And there is our little mermaid. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, be sure to give us a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed already and you're enjoying the content, be sure to subscribe and then hit that bell icon, and that way you won't miss out on any future videos. If you've got any questions about anything I've done or any comments, please pop them down in that comment section. I love to hear from you guys. So stay safe, stay warm, and I will see you again soon for another crafting video.